The clinking of forks against fine china and polite small talk filled the Veterans Memorial Hall that evening. Red, white, and blue bunting draped elegantly across the walls, and a banner reading, "Honoring Asheville's Finest," hung proudly above the stage. I sat stiffly in my dress blues, the weight of my Bronze Star feeling suddenly heavy against my chest. What should have been one of my proudest moments was about to become my greatest humiliation. "You still wear that thing like it's something to be proud of?" The words cut through the ambient chatter like a knife. My brother Derek's voice carried across the table, loud enough for neighboring tables to hear. I looked up to see his familiar smirk, the one he'd perfected since childhood, now framed by an expensive haircut and designer stubble. "Playing soldier for all these years while leeching off Mom and Dad," he continued, swirling his whiskey. "After tonight, you're on your own. Don't come crawling to us again." Laughter erupted from his side of the table, where his real estate partners sat in their tailored suits. I remained frozen, my military posture back straight, shoulders squared, now the only thing keeping me from crumbling. My mother looked down at her plate, her fingers nervously folding her napkin. My father sighed deeply but said nothing, his silence a betrayal all its own. The room quieted. Strangers' eyes darted in our direction, then quickly away. The damage was done. I had returned to Asheville 3 months ago after my third deployment, 10 years of service to my country, and this was my homecoming. Tonight was meant to be special. The mayor herself had invited me as a recipient of the Asheville Valor Commendation. I had asked my family to share this moment, foolishly believing they would be proud. "Captain Blake?" A voice broke through my thoughts. The mayor's assistant stood beside me. "We're ready for you on stage in 5 minutes." I nodded, unable to find my voice. Across the table, Derek was already engaged in another conversation, his outburst seemingly forgotten. My parents still wouldn't meet my eyes. As I stood to follow the assistant, I caught a glimpse of myself in a decorative mirror on the wall. My uniform was impeccable, every button shined, every crease sharp. The woman staring back at me had commanded troops in combat zones, had saved lives under fire, had earned every ribbon and medal through blood and grit. Yet here, in the safety of home, I had never felt more diminished. "And now," the mayor's voice boomed through the microphone, "it is my distinct honor to present this year's Asheville Valor Commendation to one of our own, Captain Morgan Blake." The applause felt hollow as I walked to the stage, my boots echoing on the hardwood floor. I accepted the plaque with a firm handshake and turned to face the crowd. The spotlight was blinding, but not enough to obscure the empty chairs where my family had been sitting. They had left. "Thank you, Mayor Hendricks," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "And thank you to everyone who continues to support our veterans." I kept my speech brief, focusing on the needs of returning service members rather than my personal story. As I spoke, I made a decision. By morning, I would be gone from my parents' house. Whatever sanctuary I thought I'd find there had been an illusion. Later that night, I packed my duffel bag in the childhood bedroom that had never quite felt like mine again. Photos of Derek's real estate awards dominated the hallway outside. His success had always been the louder story in our family's narrative. My phone buzzed with a text from an old Army friend, Sophia. "Heard you're back in town. Need a place to crash? My cabin's got a spare room." I stared at the message for a long moment before replying. "Actually, yes. Just for a few days until I figure things out." As I zipped my bag closed, I took one last look around the room. I left an envelope on the bed containing 3 months' worth of rent money I'd been silently contributing to my parents' mortgage, along with a simple note. "Thank you for your hospitality." The house was quiet as I slipped out the front door. My father's snores rumbled from upstairs, and my mother had retreated to her sewing room hours ago. Neither had spoken to me after we returned from the dinner. The night air was cool against my face as I loaded my few possessions into my truck. Asheville's mountains loomed dark against the starry sky, familiar yet suddenly distant. This city had once been home, but now it felt like just another place I was passing through. As I drove toward Sophia's cabin on the outskirts of town, I replayed Derek's words in my mind. The mockery, the dismissal of my service, the public humiliation, all from my own brother. The pain ran deep, but beneath it burned something else. Resolve. I'd survived war zones. I'd led men and women through hell and brought them back. I'd rebuilt myself after seeing things no one should see. This was just another battlefield, and I knew how to fight. What I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that by sunrise, The tables would turn so dramatically that even I couldn't have predicted it. I arrived at Sophia's cabin just after midnight. The porch light was on, and she was waiting in the doorway, her familiar silhouette a welcome sight. We had served together in our first deployment, saved each other more times than either of us cared to count. "Rough night?" she asked, eyeing my expression. "Family," I replied, the single-word explanation enough between veterans. She nodded and helped me with my bags. "The spare room's small, but it's yours as long as you need it." The cabin smelled of pine and coffee. Simple, honest. No pretense. "Thanks, Soph," I said, the tightness in my chest easing slightly. "Just until I get my feet under me." "Take your time," she replied, handing me a mug of something stronger than coffee. "We've got each other's six, remember?" I settled into the small room, finally changing out of my dress uniform. As I hung it carefully in the closet, I ran my fingers over the Bronze Star awarded for an operation in Kandahar that I rarely spoke about. Derek would never understand what it represented. Not the glory or the heroism that civilians imagined, but the cost. The sacrifice. The burden of responsibility for other lives. Sleep came fitfully that night, dreams mixing with memories of desert heat and my brother's cold laughter. I woke before dawn, my body still on military time, and went for a run in the misty mountains. The physical exertion cleared my head, and by the time I returned to the cabin, I had made peace with my new reality. I would rebuild. Again. It's what soldiers do. What I couldn't have known as I showered and dressed that morning was how quickly that rebuilding would begin. Or that the first brick would be laid by the very person who had torn down my walls. At precisely 6:42 a.m., as I sat on Sophia's porch with my first cup of coffee, watching the sun crest over the Blue Ridge Mountains, a black BMW came speeding up the gravel driveway, dust billowing behind it. The car screeched to a halt. The driver's door flung open, and there stood Derek, disheveled, pale, his designer shirt untucked and wrinkled. For the first time in my adult life, I saw something in my brother's eyes that I never expected. Fear. "Morgan?" Derek's voice cracked as he stood in Sophia's driveway, the morning dew soaking the Italian leather of his expensive shoes. "I need your help." I took another sip of coffee, letting the silence stretch between us. The birds continued their morning songs, indifferent to human drama. Sophia had left for her shift at the VA hospital, so it was just my brother and me, facing each other across a divide much wider than the wooden porch steps. "How did you find me?" I finally asked, my voice calm. "Mom told me you might be with your army friend." He ran a hand through his usually perfect hair, now sticking up at odd angles. "I've been driving around all night, calling everyone. You weren't answering your phone. I had turned it off after texting Sophia." "What do you want, Derek?" He glanced around nervously, as if expecting someone to emerge from the trees. "Can we talk inside?" "No." The answer came quickly, definitively. "Say what you need to say." His shoulders slumped. The cocky real estate broker from last night was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. He pulled his phone from his pocket and handed it to me, the screen displaying a breaking news article. Asheville luxury homes under investigation. CEO Derek Blake named in federal probe. I scrolled through the article, the details landing like body blows. Tax evasion, falsified property documents, insider trading. The FBI had raided his office at dawn. All assets frozen. "Arrest warrants pending. It's not what it looks like," he said quickly. My partner James, he was handling all the financials. "I didn't know, Morgan." "I swear I didn't know." I handed the phone back to him. "And you're here because—" They froze everything. My accounts, credit cards, even seized my house as evidence. "I can't go to Mom and Dad's, they're watching the place. I have nowhere else to go." His voice dropped to a whisper. I know what I said last night was unforgivable. I was drunk, jealous, stupid. Jealous? The word hung in the air, almost laughable. Derek leaned against his car, suddenly looking 10 years older. "You don't get it, do you? You've always been the noble one. The brave one. The one with purpose. I sell houses to rich people and drive a fancy car. Last night, watching everyone honor you, I just snapped. For a moment, I glimpsed the little brother I'd protected from neighborhood bullies decades ago. Before success had hardened him. Before money had become his measure of worth. "You humiliated me," I said quietly. "In front of everyone, I know." His eyes finally met mine. And now look at me. Karma's a swift bitch, isn't she? Despite everything, a small, treacherous part of me wanted to laugh at the cosmic timing. Not even 12 hours had passed since his public declaration that I'd have no place to stay. I stood up, setting my coffee mug on the porch railing. What exactly are you asking for, Derek? Just a place to lay low for a few days. Until my lawyer can sort this out. He gestured to his car. I grabbed what I could before they came. I'm not asking for money or anything, just sanctuary. The military had taught me many things: discipline, strategy, the value of intelligence before action. But most importantly, it had taught me about brotherhood, that sometimes the person you trusted with your life might be the same one who'd drag you to safety when everything went to hell. You can park around back, I said finally. Out of sight from the road. There's a shed that Sophia uses for storage. It has a cot, relief washed over his face. Thank you. Morgan, I held up my hand, cutting him off. This isn't forgiveness. This is what decent people do. Something you might need to learn. He nodded, unable to meet my eyes again. And Derek? I added as he started to move his car. You don't get to come inside the cabin. Not until you earn it. Over the next 3 days, Derek Blake experienced a life unlike anything his privileged existence had prepared him for. The shed had no insulation, leaving him shivering in the April mountain nights. There was a garden hose for washing, an outhouse instead of his marble bathroom, and meals were whatever I decided to bring him. Usually military MREs I still had in my truck. I didn't do it out of cruelty. I did it because some lessons can't be taught. They must be lived. On the second morning, I found him attempting to fix Sophia's broken lawnmower. His hands were blistered and stained with grease, his designer shirt ruined. Never fixed anything mechanical before, he admitted when he saw me watching. Figured I should make myself useful somehow. By the third day, news of the scandal had exploded across local media. I brought him the newspaper, which featured his company's logo crossed out in red, and the headline, Asheville's Real Estate Empire Crumbles, Hundreds of Homeowners Affected. They're making it sound like I'm a monster, he said, sitting on an overturned bucket outside the shed. Like I set out to hurt people, did you? I asked. He was quiet for a long moment. I set out to be successful, to be important. The rest, I didn't look too closely. I didn't want to know. That evening, I brought him a folding chair and sat with him as the sun set behind the mountains. We were both different people than we had been at that dinner just days ago. Mom called, I told him. They're being questioned too. Dad's retirement fund was invested in your company. Derek put his head in his hands. God, I've ruined everything. For everyone? Maybe, I agreed. Or maybe this is your chance to start over. To build something real this time. He looked up at me, confusion in his eyes. What do you mean? Tomorrow, I said, standing up. I'm taking you somewhere. Be ready at 800. The next morning, Derek emerged from the shed looking slightly less disheveled. He'd used the garden hose to wash his clothes, hanging them over tree branches to dry. It was a small thing, but it showed initiative. I drove us into town in my truck, deliberately passing by the Veterans Memorial Hall where he'd humiliated me. He had the decency to look away. Our destination was a small, nondescript building on the edge of downtown. The sign simply read, Veterans Outreach Center. What are we doing here? Derek asked as I parked. Education, I replied. Inside, the center was alive with activity. Men and women of all ages, some missing limbs, others bearing invisible scars, were engaged in various activities. Job training, support groups, art therapy, a community built from shared sacrifice. Captain Blake, a young man with a prosthetic leg, approached us. We missed you yesterday. Had some family matters, Rodriguez, I replied, then gestured to Derek. This is my brother. He's volunteering with us today. Derek's startled expression almost made me smile. For the next 8 hours, I put my brother to work. He sorted donations, served lunch in the cafeteria, and listened, really listened, as veterans shared stories of both horror and hope. Stories of losing everything, of rebuilding from nothing, of finding purpose beyond loss. By late afternoon, something had changed in him. The entitled arrogance was gone, replaced by a quieter presence. As we prepared to leave, he paused to help an older veteran who had dropped his cane. You were a medic? Derek asked, noticing the man's cap. Vietnam? The veteran nodded. Fixed bodies out there, been fixing houses back here ever since. Houses? Derek's interest perked up. Like construction? Habitat for humanity, the man explained. We build homes for people who need them. Veterans, single parents, you name it. Always need more hands. As we drove back to the cabin in the fading light, Derek was unusually quiet. Why did you take me there? He finally asked as we turned onto the gravel road. I kept my eyes on the road. Because you called my uniform shameful. Those people in there? They gave everything for a country that sometimes forgets them. But I don't forget. Because I earned this life, just like they did. We pulled up to the cabin, and I turned off the engine. In the sudden silence, Derek's voice was barely audible. I'm sorry, Morgan, for everything. For the first time since he had appeared at the cabin, I really looked at my brother, not the successful businessman or the arrogant jerk from the dinner, but the person beneath all that. Someone lost. Someone who had built his life on shifting sand and was now watching it all wash away. It's getting cold, I said, stepping out of the truck. You can sleep on the couch tonight. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a start. What neither of us knew was that tomorrow would bring another unexpected visitor to the cabin. Door one that would change both our paths in ways we couldn't. Imagine, the next morning dawned crisp and clear. I woke at 500 as usual, my body still operating on military time. Derek was asleep on the couch, his tall frame awkwardly curled into the small space. For a moment I stood watching him, this stranger who was my brother. In sleep, his face had lost the hard edges of ambition, resembling more the boy I'd grown up with. I slipped out quietly for my morning run. The mountain air filled my lungs, clearing away the remnants of dreams and doubts. Running had been my sanctuary since basic training, the rhythm of feet against earth. Breath forming clouds in the cool air, thoughts narrowing to the simple act of forward motion. By the time I returned, Sophia was in the kitchen making coffee, and Derek was awake, looking uncomfortable in yesterday's clothes. Morning, Sophia said, nodding to both of us. There's someone coming by to see you, Morgan, I raised an eyebrow. Who? Mayor Hendricks called. Said she needs to speak with you urgently. Derek paled visibly at the mention of the mayor. His scandal had implicated many of Asheville's elite, and the mayor had been a vocal supporter of his company. Did she say what about? I asked, pouring myself a cup of coffee. No. But she sounded serious. Sophia glanced at Derek. Might want to make yourself scarce. He nodded quickly and retreated to the back porch. Precisely at 9 a.m., a black SUV with the city's emblem pulled up to the cabin. Mayor Hendricks stepped out, followed by a man in a crisp suit whom I recognized as the city attorney. Captain Blake? The mayor greeted me formally as I met them on the porch. Her eyes darted past me, scanning the cabin interior visible through the open door. Thank you for seeing us on such short notice. Of course, Mayor, please come in. We settled in Sophia's small living room. The mayor declined coffee, getting straight to business. I'll be direct, Captain. Your brother's actions have created a crisis in our community. Hundreds of local families invested in his developments. Many stand to lose everything, I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. I understand, but I'm not sure how I can help. Derek and I aren't particularly close. The mayor exchanged glances with the attorney. We have reason to believe Derek might be hiding assets. Offshore accounts, property under shell companies, the usual tricks. The FBI is building their case, but in the meantime, people are suffering. Again, I'm not sure how this involves me. We've been told he's staying here, the mayor said bluntly. We need to speak with him. I felt a surge of protective instinct, surprising myself. Who told you that? Your mother called my office this morning. She's worried about him. Of course she was. Derek had always been her favorite, even now. I considered my options carefully. The military had taught me about loyalty, but also about justice, about protecting the vulnerable, about making hard choices. I'll speak with him, I said finally. But I need your word on something first. The mayor leaned forward. What's that? If he cooperates, fully returns whatever he can, helps make this right, I want assurances he'll be treated fairly. No public spectacle, no excessive punishment to make an example of him. That's not entirely in my power, the mayor replied. But I can advocate for leniency in exchange for full cooperation. I nodded and stood up. Wait here. I found Derek on the back porch, staring out at the mountains, his posture reminiscent of a man awaiting execution. You heard? I asked. He nodded without turning. Every word. These cabin walls aren't exactly soundproof. What are you going to do? Derek finally turned to face me, his expression resigned. What choice do I have? I'm finished in this town either way. You could run, I pointed out. Take that fancy car and disappear. A bitter laugh escaped him. And go where? Do what? I don't know how to do anything except sell houses and lie about their value. He ran a hand through his hair. Besides, they'd catch me eventually. Yes, I agreed. They would. A moment of understanding passed between us. In that instant, I saw something in my brother I hadn't seen in years. Clarity. There is an offshore account, he admitted quietly, and property in my ex-girlfriend's name. I didn't tell the FBI about either. How much? Enough to cover about 60% of what investors lost. I considered this. It won't fix everything, but it's a start. Derek looked at me. Really looked at me. Perhaps for the first time in years. Why are you helping me? After what I did to you at the dinner, after everything, I'm not doing it for you, I said honestly. I'm doing it for the people you hurt. And maybe a little bit for that kid who used to follow me around the neighborhood, wanting to be just like his big sister. Something in his expression shifted. A flicker of that boy visible beneath the man he'd become. I'll talk to them, he said finally. I nodded and led him back inside. What followed was 3 hours of brutal honesty. Derek disclosed everything, the account numbers, the property details, the names of everyone involved in the scheme. The city attorney took copious notes, occasionally making calls to verify information. The mayor's expression shifted from skepticism to guarded approval as Derek's cooperation became clear. This will go a long way, she said finally, gathering her papers. The DA will want a formal statement, but this is a good start, Mr. Blake. As they prepared to leave, the mayor pulled me aside. That was unexpected. What did you say to him? I shook my head. Nothing he didn't already know. After they left, Derek collapsed into a chair, exhaustion etched in every line of his face. What happens now? Now? I handed him a glass of water. Now you start rebuilding, one brick at a time. That evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, my phone rang. It was my father, Morgan. His voice sounded older than I remembered. Your mother and I, we need to talk to you. Both of you. I'm listening, I said, putting the phone on speaker so Derek could hear. We know Derek's with you. The mayor told us everything. He paused. We were wrong, Morgan. About so many things. Derek leaned closer to the phone. Dad, I'm sorry. About the company, about your retirement fund. No, my father interrupted. I'm the one who's sorry. I invested in your company because I was proud of you, too proud to ask the right questions. And Morgan, his voice broke slightly, we didn't defend you at that dinner. We sat there and let your brother disrespect everything you've sacrificed for this country. We failed you both, in different ways. The admission hung in the air between us, unexpected and raw. We'd like to come see you, my mother's voice joined in. If that's all right. I looked at Derek, who nodded slightly. Tomorrow, I said. Come for lunch. That night, unable to sleep, I found Derek sitting outside on the porch steps, staring at the stars. Couldn't sleep either? I asked, sitting beside him. Not really. He gestured upward. You can actually see the stars out here. In my neighborhood, there's too much light pollution. We sat in companionable silence for a while. I've been thinking, he said finally. That veteran we met yesterday, the one who builds houses, I want to talk to him again. About? Derek turned to me, his expression earnest. I know how to sell houses, Morgan. I know real estate. What if I use that knowledge for something good for once? Helping veterans find affordable housing, maybe? It was such an unexpected suggestion that I didn't immediately respond. It's stupid, right? He said, misinterpreting my silence. No, I replied slowly. It's actually not stupid at all. I'll probably go to jail for a while, he continued. But afterward, I could start something new. Something honest. For the first time since returning to Asheville, I felt a glimmer of hope. Not just for myself, but for Derek, too. Not redemption exactly, but the possibility of it. A path forward. Get some sleep, I told him, standing up. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. As I headed back inside, he called after me softly. Morgan, thank you. For not shutting the door when I showed up here. I paused in the doorway. That's what soldiers do, Derek. We open doors for people who are lost. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely, but it was a beginning. Lunch with my parents was set for noon, but I was up at dawn, restless energy propelling me through my morning routine. Derek helped Sophia in the garden, his designer watch looking absurdly out of place as he pulled weeds and turned soil. There was something almost comical about watching my brother, who once bragged about his $200 manicures, now digging in dirt with his bare hands. "You're actually not terrible at this," Sophia commented, watching him properly stake a tomato plant. "Eagle Scout." "If you can believe it," Derek replied, before I decided that money was more important than everything else. I left them to their gardening and went inside to prepare lunch. Nothing fancy, just sandwiches, salad, and iced tea, but my hands were uncharacteristically unsteady. I'd faced enemy fire with more composure than I felt about this family reunion. "Need help?" Derek appeared in the doorway, dirt smudged across his forehead. "You can set the table," I said, pointing to the cabinets. "Plates are up there." We worked in silence for a few minutes, the simple domestic activity creating a strange bubble of normalcy. "They're going to apologize," Derek said suddenly. Dad sounded different on the phone. I continued slicing tomatoes. "They've apologized before. After you went to college and I enlisted. After I was deployed the first time. After I came home with this." I gestured to the scar running along my forearm, a souvenir from Kandahar. "This time feels different," he insisted. I looked up at him. "Why? Because now you're on my side?" He had the grace to look ashamed. "Maybe. Or maybe because they've finally seen us both clearly." At precisely noon, my parents' Volvo pulled up the gravel driveway. They emerged looking smaller somehow, diminished. My father's confident stride was gone, replaced by the cautious gait of a man who had just glimpsed his own mortality in his financial statements. My mother clutched her purse like a shield. Sophia discreetly excused herself, mentioning errands in town, leaving just the four of us, the Blake family, together for the first time since that disastrous dinner. "Morgan," my mother stepped forward first. Arms outstretched, then hesitated, reading my body language. "You look well?" "I am well," I replied, gesturing toward the cabin. "Let's eat inside. It's getting warm out here." Lunch began in awkward silence, the sound of cutlery against plates painfully loud. My father cleared his throat several times but seemed unable to find words. Derek studied his plate with intense focus. Finally, my mother spoke. "We saw the news." "About Derek's company," she glanced at my brother. "About what you did yesterday, turning over those accounts." Derek nodded without looking up. "The mayor called us," my father added. "Said you were instrumental in making that happen, Morgan." I took a sip of iced tea. Derek made his own choice. "After you showed me what real courage looks like," Derek interjected quietly. My parents exchanged glances, confusion evident in their expressions. "What do you mean?" my mother asked. Derek set down his fork. "Morgan took me to the Veterans Outreach Center. Made me see what actual sacrifice looks like." He looked directly at our parents. "Made me understand what I've been mocking all these years." "We should have done that," my father said, his voice rough with emotion. "We should have shown you both the same respect." Instead, my mother continued, tears welling in her eyes, "we celebrated Derek's success without questioning how he achieved it, and we took your service for granted, Morgan." I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, the same constriction I'd experienced during panic attacks after my second tour. Words stuck in my throat. "Why?" I finally managed. "Why was it so easy to dismiss everything I've done?" My parents looked at each other, a lifetime of shared understanding passing between them. "Fear," my father admitted. "Every time you deployed, we lived in terror of that official car pulling up to our house. It was easier to pretend your career wasn't dangerous, that it wasn't important. And Derek's success was safe," my mother added. "Comfortable. Something we could brag about without that knot of fear." "So you chose the easier path," I said, the pieces finally fitting together. "Just like you did at the dinner." My father's shoulders slumped. "Yes, and we were wrong. So wrong." Derek reached across the table, taking my hand in a gesture so unexpected I nearly pulled away. "Tell them what you told me, Morgan, about why you stayed in the Army all these years." All eyes turned to me. I'd never discussed my motivations with my family. They'd never asked. "I stayed because I found purpose there," I said slowly. "Because for the first time in my life, I was part of something bigger than myself." We looked out for each other, not because we were family by blood, but because we chose to be family. "The way we should have looked out for you," my mother whispered. A heavy silence fell over the table. Years of unspoken truths finally surfacing. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness," my father said finally, "but I am asking for a chance to do better, to be the parents you both deserve." I studied their faces, the familiar features now lined with regret and hope. Part of me wanted to hold on to the anger, to make them feel the weight of their choices as I had felt the weight of my uniform while they sat silent at that dinner. But another part, the part that had led troops through impossible situations, that had learned when to fight and when to extend a hand, recognized the courage it took for them to come here today. "I can't promise anything," I said honestly, "but I'm willing to try." Relief washed over their faces, followed quickly by determination. "That's all we're asking for," my father said. After lunch, Derek helped our parents load several boxes of his belongings into their car. He would be staying with them until his court date the following week. "The FBI wants me to surrender tomorrow," he explained as we stood in the driveway. "It's part of the deal. I'll probably be in jail until the trial." I nodded. "I can visit, if you want." "I'd like that." He hesitated, then pulled an envelope from his pocket. "I want you to have this. It's the deed to my lake house in Tennessee. They didn't freeze it because it's in a trust." He pressed it into my hand. "It's not much compared to what you've done for me, but it's something." I pushed it back. "I don't want your property, Derek." "It's not a payoff," he insisted. "It's a fresh start for both of us. A place where we could meet sometimes when this is all over. Start being brother and sister again." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. I took the envelope, not committing but not refusing either. As my family prepared to leave, my mother embraced me tightly. "We're so proud of you, Morgan," she whispered. "We should have told you that every day." I returned her hug stiffly at first, then with genuine warmth. "I know, Mom. I know." Standing on Sophia's porch, watching the two cars disappear down the gravel road, I felt oddly light, as if a weight I'd carried for years had begun to lift. Not gone completely, but shifting, becoming bearable. Sophia joined me, handing me a beer. "Family," she said, making it sound like both a question and a statement. "Family," I agreed, taking a long sip. Neither of us needed to say more. Some battles leave no visible scars, but they change you nonetheless. The war at home had been as real as any I'd fought overseas, and perhaps, finally, there was a path to peace. What I didn't know then was that the true test of our fragile reconciliation was still to come, and it would arrive in the most public way possible. The next morning arrived with a sense of inevitability. Derek was up early, dressed in the most respectable clothes he had managed to salvage, a blue button-down shirt and khaki pants that Sophia had helped him iron. His usual confidence was absent, replaced by a quiet resignation that was somehow more dignified than his former bravado. "You don't have to come with me," he said as I grabbed my truck keys. "I know." I met his eyes steadily, "But I'm going to anyway." The drive to the federal building in downtown Asheville was mostly silent. The streets were just coming alive, shopkeepers raising shutters, joggers navigating sidewalks, the city awakening to another day of ordinary lives. For us, there was nothing ordinary about this day. "I've been thinking about what happens after," Derek said as we waited at a red light. "Assuming I don't get 20 years. "You won't," I assured him. "The prosecutor indicated 5 years maximum, less with good behavior, especially since you're cooperating." He nodded, staring out the window. "Still, that's a long time to think about my mistakes." "Use it," I suggested. "Plan, read, learn things that will help you build something better when you get out." "Like what you did," he observed. "After each deployment, rebuilding yourself." The comparison startled me. I'd never thought of my military service in those terms, but there was truth in it. Each tour had broken me down in different ways, and each return had required a conscious rebuilding. "I guess so," I acknowledged. We pulled up to the federal building, a towering structure of glass and concrete that seemed designed to intimidate. Derek's lawyer was waiting on the steps, along with 2 FBI agents in dark suits. A small group of reporters huddled nearby, cameras ready. "Vultures," Derek muttered, then caught himself. "No, that's not fair. They're just doing their job. Reporting on the fall of the mighty." He attempted a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I parked and turned to face my brother. "You ready for this?" He took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." As we approached the building, the reporters surged forward, shouting questions, Mr. Blake, did you intentionally defraud investors? Is it true you've surrendered hidden assets? Are family members implicated in your scheme? Derek's lawyer stepped forward, hands raised. My client is here voluntarily to cooperate with authorities. He has no comment at this time. One persistent reporter broke through, thrusting a microphone toward us. Is this your sister, the Army captain? Is the military connected to your financial operations? Something in me snapped. I stepped in front of Derek, my voice clear and commanding, the same tone I'd used to direct troops under fire. My name is Captain Morgan Blake, United States Army. I've served 3 tours overseas defending the principles this country was founded on, including justice and accountability. My brother is here today because he's chosen to face the consequences of his actions. That's all I have to say. The reporter blinked, momentarily silenced by my directness. The cameras continued to flash as we moved past. At the entrance, Derek paused. That was... Thank you. For what? For not denying me. You could have told them we're estranged? That you had nothing to do with me, I shrugged. You're still my brother. Something passed between us then, an understanding deeper than words. The distance we'd built over years of diverging paths hadn't erased the fundamental connection of shared blood and history. Captain Blake, one of the FBI agents approached. We need to take your brother into custody now. Derek straightened his shoulders and extended his hands, ready for handcuffs. The agent shook his head. That won't be necessary, Mr. Blake. You've been cooperative so far. Just come with us. Derek turned to me. I'll call when I can. I nodded, suddenly uncertain what to do with my hands, my body. Military training hadn't prepared me for this moment. Derek, I said as he started to turn away. I'll be here when you get out. A flicker of genuine hope crossed his face. Then he was gone, walking between the agents through heavy glass doors that swung shut behind him with quiet finality. I stood on the steps for a long moment, aware of the reporters still watching, of the morning sun warming the back of my neck, of the strange emptiness in my chest. It wasn't grief exactly, nor relief. Perhaps it was simply the absence of something I'd carried for too long. Resentment. As I walked back to my truck, my phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. Local news wants to interview you about veteran housing initiatives. Mayor's office gave them your name. I stared at the message, confused. I wasn't involved in any housing initiatives. Then it clicked. This was connected to Derek's mention of helping veterans find affordable housing. Somehow the idea had taken on a life of its own. What should I tell them? I texted back. Her response came quickly. Maybe hear them out? Could be good. I drove back to the cabin with my thoughts swirling. The last thing I wanted was more public attention. Yet something about this opportunity felt right. A chance to channel the chaos of recent events into something constructive. That afternoon, a reporter from the Asheville Citizen-Times sat across from me at Sophia's kitchen table. She was younger than I expected, with bright eyes and a notebook full of questions. So, Captain Blake, she began, the mayor mentioned you're developing a program to help veterans secure affordable housing in Asheville. I took a sip of water, buying time. It's in the very early stages, I said carefully. More of a concept than a program at this point. But the concept is compelling, she pressed. Using real estate expertise to match veterans with suitable housing options, possibly even developing new property specifically designed for their needs. I realized she was describing exactly what Derek had briefly mentioned, the idea he'd had after meeting the Vietnam veteran at the outreach center. Yes, I said slowly. That's the general idea. And this comes at a perfect time, she continued eagerly. With the scandal surrounding Asheville luxury homes, there's a renewed focus on ethical real estate practices. People want to support businesses that give back to the community. The irony wasn't lost on me, that from the ashes of Derek's corrupt enterprise, something worthwhile might emerge. What's your timeline? She asked. When do you hope to launch? That depends on various factors, I hedged. Funding, partnerships, regulatory approvals, she scribbled in her notebook. Would you be willing to be profiled for our Sunday feature? From battlefield to home front, how one soldier is fighting for veterans' housing. The title made me uncomfortable, placing me in a spotlight I hadn't sought. Yet I couldn't deny the potential impact such publicity might have for the veteran community. I need to think about it, I said honestly. After she left, I sat on the porch swing watching the sun begin its descent behind the mountains. The property was peaceful, the air fragrant with pine and wildflowers. Such a contrast to the institutional walls that now surrounded Derek. My phone rang. My father. "We saw the news," he said without preamble. Derek looked dignified. "He's trying," I replied. "Morgan," his voice lowered, "there's something you should know. Those reporters asking about a veterans housing initiative? That wasn't just random. Derek called us last night, asked us to speak to the mayor about the idea, said it was important to him that something good come from all this." I gripped the phone tighter. "He did what?" "He wanted to make sure you got credit for inspiring it. Said it might help you find your footing back home." My throat tightened unexpectedly. The brother who had publicly humiliated me days ago had now publicly honored me without even being present to witness the result. "Are you still there?" my father asked. "Yes," I managed. "Just processing." His lawyer thinks it might help his case too, showing remorse through positive action. But that wasn't his main motivation, Morgan. He really wants to make amends. After we hung up, I sat in the gathering dusk, turning this new information over in my mind. The reporter's questions now made sense. The mayor's sudden interest in my non-existent housing program? The opportunity that had seemingly fallen into my lap, Sophia found me still sitting there an hour later. "Penny for your thoughts, Captain?" she asked, settling beside me. "I think my brother might be setting me up," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "For what? Another fall?" I shook my head. "For a second chance. For both of us. And how do you feel about that?" I considered the question carefully. Terrified, unprepared, and maybe a little intrigued, Sophia smiled. "Sounds like the start of every good mission I've ever been on." As night fell completely, stars emerging in the clear mountain sky, I made a decision. I would meet with the reporter again. I would explore this housing initiative idea. Not because Derek had orchestrated it, and not because it might help his legal situation, but because it addressed a need I understood intimately, the struggle of veterans to find their place after service. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new complications. But for tonight, sitting under stars that looked the same whether viewed from Asheville or Afghanistan, I allowed myself to feel something I hadn't felt since returning home. Purpose. The Asheville Citizen-Times ran their feature the following Sunday, complete with a photo of me in civilian clothes standing outside the Veterans Outreach Center. The headline read, "Army Captain Launches Housing Initiative for Local Veterans." The article painted me as a visionary with a comprehensive plan, rather than someone who had stumbled into an unexpected opportunity. My phone hadn't stopped ringing since. "That's the third developer this morning," Sophia remarked as I ended another call. "People are taking this seriously." I ran a hand through my hair, overwhelmed. "Too seriously? I don't have a business plan, startup capital, or any actual experience in housing development." "But you have something more valuable," she countered. "Credibility, trust. The community respects you." A week had passed since Derek's surrender. He'd been denied bail, deemed a flight risk due to his financial resources and connections. I'd visited him twice at the detention center sterile, brief encounters in a room full of other inmates and their families. He'd looked smaller in the standard-issue jumpsuit, but his eyes had been clear, his mind focused. "Are you pursuing the housing thing?" he'd asked immediately. "It's pursuing me," I'd replied. "Thanks to you." He'd smiled then, not his old practiced smile meant to charm, but something more genuine. "Use my contacts," he'd urged. "My assistant, Melissa. She knows everyone in real estate around here, and she wasn't involved in any of the illegal stuff. She'll help you." Now sitting at Sophia's kitchen table surrounded by notes from countless phone conversations, I contemplated calling Melissa. It felt like crossing a line, fully committing to this new path. "You know," Sophia said, refilling my coffee cup, "you don't have to do this alone. I've got some connections at the VA who might be interested in partnering." I looked up at her. "You think this could actually work?" "I think," she said carefully, "that you need this as much as those veterans need housing." Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. Sophia answered it, returning with Mayor Hendricks. "Captain Blake," the mayor greeted me, all business despite the informal setting. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," I gestured to a chair. "Coffee?" "Please." She settled across from me, taking in the scattered papers. "I see you're making progress on the Veterans Housing Initiative." Progress might be an overstatement, I admitted. I'm still in the research phase. The mayor nodded, accepting the coffee Sophia offered. That's actually why I'm here. The city council met yesterday. We've been discussing what to do with the properties seized from Asheville luxury homes. My attention sharpened. And? There's a development on the east side, 30 acres, partially constructed. The foundations are laid, utilities connected, but construction halted when the scandal broke. She sipped her coffee. The council is considering donating that property to a nonprofit that would complete it as affordable housing for veterans. That's significant, I said, trying to process the implications. It would be, she agreed. If such a nonprofit existed. The unspoken question hung in the air between us. You want me to create one? I stated flatly. I want to solve several problems at once, she countered. The city needs to distance itself from the scandal. The property needs to be completed rather than sitting vacant. Veterans need housing. And you, she met my eyes directly, need a mission. The military directness of her assessment caught me off guard. What makes you think that? I've worked with enough returning service members to recognize the signs, she said. The purpose, the structure you had in the Army civilian life rarely provides that. This could. I thought of the outreach center, of the veterans I'd met there struggling to find their footing in a world that didn't understand what they'd sacrificed. I don't have the expertise to run a nonprofit, I said, though part of me was already considering possibilities. But you know how to build a team. How to lead. The rest you can learn. The mayor stood, setting down her barely touched coffee. Think about it. The council meets again next week. I need an answer by then. After she left, Sophia raised an eyebrow at me. So I need to talk to Derek, I replied, already reaching for my keys. The detention center was busier than usual, visitors filling the waiting area. I signed in, submitted to the security check, and was eventually led to the visitation room. Derek was already seated at one of the small tables, looking more at ease in his surroundings than I would have expected. Twice in 1 week, he remarked as I sat across from him. I'm honored. The mayor came to see me, I said without preamble. About the East Ridge development. His expression shifted, suddenly alert. What about it? I explained the council's proposal, the property donation, the nonprofit, the housing initiative taking physical form. Can it work? I asked when I'd finished. Be honest. Is the property viable? Are there hidden problems I should know about? Derek considered this carefully. The location is excellent. The foundations are solid. I supervised that work myself. The plans were good, too, designed for energy efficiency. He leaned forward. The biggest challenge will be funding to complete construction. Banks won't touch anything associated with Asheville luxury homes right now. So it's a non-starter. I didn't say that. He tapped his fingers on the table, thinking, there are other funding sources, grants, private investors with social impact priorities, veterans organizations with capital to deploy. You seem to have given this a lot of thought, I observed. A ghost of his old smile appeared. I've had nothing but time to think, Morgan. And this, he gestured between us, giving you a real shot at building something important. It's the only positive thing I can do from in here. For the first time, I allowed myself to seriously consider the possibility, not just as a vague concept, but as a concrete future. Me leading a nonprofit, creating homes for fellow veterans, building something lasting in the community that had both nurtured and wounded me. I'd need help, I said finally. Call Melissa, Derek urged again. And there's a file in my home office top drawer of the filing cabinet, labeled East Ridge Alternatives. It contains contingency plans I developed before. Everything fell apart. Ideas for lower cost completion, potential partners, funding structures. Your house is sealed by the FBI? I reminded him. He shook his head. Mom has a key. They only sealed my office downtown. The guard announced that visitation time was ending. As I stood to leave, Derek caught my hand, a rare physical gesture between us. Morgan, he said quietly, you can do this. You've led troops through worse conditions than navigating local zoning laws. I squeezed his hand briefly before letting go. I'll let you know what I decide. That evening, I called my parents and explained the situation. My mother answered immediately. I'll get the file right now, she said without hesitation. Your father and I will bring it to you tonight. 2 hours later, they arrived at Sophia's cabin with not just the file Derek had mentioned, but boxes of additional materials market analyses, construction estimates, architectural drawings. He kept all of this at the house? I asked, surveying the unexpected wealth of information. Derek always had a contingency plan, my father explained. It's what made him successful. What made his downfall so surprising? We spent hours going through the documents, spreading them across Sophia's living room floor. The East Ridge development had been designed as luxury condominiums, but the underlying structure could be adapted for smaller, more affordable units. The location offered access to public transportation, proximity to the VA hospital, and community amenities that would be perfect for veterans transitioning back to civilian life. As midnight approached, I sat back on my heels, mind racing with possibilities. "You're going to do it, aren't you?" my mother asked softly. I looked up at her, then at my father, then at Sophia, who had been quietly supportive throughout the evening. "I think I am," I admitted. My father nodded, a mixture of pride and apprehension in his expression. "It won't be easy. The Blake name is toxic right now." "Then I won't use it," I said simply. "This will be about the mission, not the family legacy." The next morning, I called Melissa, Derek's former assistant. She agreed to meet me for coffee downtown neutral territory where neither of us would feel too exposed. She was younger than I expected, professionally dressed, but with an edge that suggested she wasn't just a corporate drone. Her handshake was firm, her gaze direct. "Derek said you'd call eventually," she said as we settled at a corner table. "He told me to help you however I can." "Why would you?" I asked bluntly. "Your former boss is in jail. The company's defunct. Your reputation is at risk just being seen with a Blake." Melissa stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "Because Derek wasn't always the person he became. When I first started working for him 5 years ago, he had vision, integrity. He wanted to build beautiful homes that would last generations." She looked up at me. "Something happened along the way. He lost sight of that. Started cutting corners, but the vision was real. And you think this veterans housing project could recapture that?" "I think," she said carefully, "that it could be something better. More meaningful." She pulled a tablet from her bag, opened a document, and slid it across to me. "This is a list of contractors who weren't implicated in the scandal. Good people who did quality work and got stiffed when everything collapsed. They might be willing to help, especially for a cause like veterans housing." I scrolled through the names, recognizing some from the files Derek had kept. "Why are you doing this?" I asked again. Melissa's professional facade cracked slightly. "My brother served 2 tours in Iraq. Came home with PTSD so severe he couldn't hold a job. Ended up homeless for a while." She straightened her shoulders. "He's better now. Has an apartment, steady work. But it could have been different if there had been more support, more understanding." She met my eyes. "So yes, I'll help you. Not for Derek, for them." As we continued talking, outlining potential next steps, I felt a clarity I hadn't experienced since leaving the Army. The path forward wasn't simple or guaranteed, but it was visible now. A mission taking shape. By the time I left to meet the mayor and give her my answer, I had made my decision. Not just about the housing initiative, but about my place in Asheville, not as Derek Blake's sister, or as a returning veteran searching for purpose, but as someone building a future worthy of the sacrifices made by those who had served. The real work was just beginning. 6 months passed in a blur of permits, proposals, and presentations. What began as a tentative idea transformed into the Asheville Veterans Home Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to creating affordable, supportive housing for veterans transitioning to civilian life. The East Ridge property, once the crown jewel of Derek's luxury empire, was now being reimagined as Victory Village, a community designed specifically for those who had served. On a crisp autumn morning, I stood at the edge of the construction site, watching crews pour concrete for the community center that would anchor the development. Beside me, Sophia checked items off a clipboard, her role as program director making her as invested in this project as I was. The VA confirmed their commitment for the on-site counseling services, she reported. 2 full-time therapists starting when we open. I nodded, surveying the property that sprawled before us. The basic infrastructure Derek had started remained, but we'd completely redesigned the buildings, creating a mix of single-family homes, duplexes, and apartments that would house over 60 veterans and their families. The community center would provide support services, job training, and social spaces designed to combat the isolation many veterans experienced. Captain Blake. A voice called from across the site. Rodriguez, the young veteran I'd introduced Derek to months ago, waved from the framework of what would become a playground. Since being hired as our community outreach coordinator, he'd become the heart of the project, connecting us with veterans in need and ensuring their voices shaped every aspect of the development. I walked over, careful to navigate the construction debris. How's it coming along? On schedule, he grinned, gesturing to the structure taking shape. The accessible design is working perfectly. Kids of all abilities will be able to play here. This attention to accessibility had become a signature of our approach, recognizing that veterans' needs varied widely, from physical accommodations to privacy considerations for those with PTSD. Every detail had been thoughtfully planned with input from future residents. The reporter from the Military Times is here, Rodriguez added. She's waiting in the trailer. I suppressed a groan. The national attention had been good for fundraising, but exhausting personally. Every interview required explaining how a housing development connected to the disgraced Asheville luxury homes was now a beacon of hope for veterans. It meant telling my story, and by extension, Derek's inside the makeshift office trailer. A young woman with a recorder and notebook stood as I entered. Captain Blake, thank you for making time. She extended her hand. Emma Reyes, Military Times. Please call me Morgan, I replied, gesturing for her to sit. After 6 months of interviews, I'd learned to direct the narrative quickly. Before we start, I want to be clear this story isn't about me or my family's past. It's about what Victory Village will offer veterans who have given everything for this country. She nodded, but her expression remained determined. I understand, but readers will want to know how an Army captain ended up leading one of the most innovative veterans housing initiatives in the country, especially one built on the foundations of a real estate scandal. For a moment, I considered my standard deflection, but something made me reconsider. Perhaps it was time to own the full story, not just the parts that were comfortable. All right, I said, settling into my chair. Let's talk about how Victory Village began. For the next hour, I shared more than I had with any previous reporter. The public humiliation at the Army dinner, Derek's fall from grace, our fragile reconciliation, and how a casual comment about helping veterans had evolved into a full-fledged mission. I explained how Derek's expertise, channeled through his files and contacts, had provided the blueprint for what we were building. He calls every week from prison, I admitted. Asks about construction timelines, material selections, fundraising progress. He can't be here physically, but his influence is undeniable. Some might question building a project on the ideas of a convicted fraudster, she observed. They might, I agreed. But the beauty of this project is that it transforms something built on deception into something founded on integrity. We've been completely transparent about where the property came from and where we're taking it. She made notes, then looked up with a more personal question. And your relationship with your brother? Has that been rebuilt as well? I gazed out the window at the construction site, considering my answer carefully. We're works in progress, like this development. The foundation is stronger now, but we're still building. After the interview, I checked my watch and realized I was late for my weekly visit to the detention center. Derek had been sentenced to 4 years, considerably less than the maximum, thanks to his cooperation, and had already served nearly 7 months. When I arrived, he was waiting in the visitation room, a stack of papers in front of him. His appearance had changed subtly during his time inside. He'd lost the manicured look of a luxury real estate broker and gained a leaner, more focused demeanor. You're late, he observed as I sat down. Reporter from Military Times, I explained. She wanted the whole story. And did you give it to her? Most of it. I glanced at his papers. What's all this? Ideas for Phase 2, he said, sliding them across to me, after the current buildings are completed. We could expand to the adjacent property if the funding comes through. I leafed through his sketches and notes, impressed despite myself. You've been busy. Not much else to do in here but think, he replied with a half-smile. Besides, the warden lets me use the computer lab for this. Says it's rehabilitative. We spent the next hour discussing his ideas, debating logistics, and planning next steps. It was still strange sometimes, this new relationship we were building, professional and personal lines blurring as we collaborated on something meaningful to both of us. Mom and Dad visited yesterday, Derek mentioned as our time wound down. Dad's been helping with some of the electrical contracting connections. Our parents had found their own ways to contribute to Victory Village, my father through his construction industry contacts, my mother by organizing fundraising events. It had become a family mission, though none of us had planned it that way. They seem better, I observed. More like themselves. Derek nodded. Crisis has a way of stripping away pretense. They're not trying to impress anyone anymore. As the guard signaled the end of visitation, Derek held my gaze. The Military Times reporter, did she ask if you've forgiven me? The directness of the question caught me off guard. No, why? Because I've been wondering that myself. His expression was uncharacteristically vulnerable. Have you? I considered the journey of the past 6 months. How anger had gradually given way to purpose. How resentment had been channeled into creation. I'm not sure forgiveness is a destination you reach, I said finally. It's more like a path you choose to walk. And yes, I'm walking it. Relief flickered across his face. Good enough for me, Captain. As I left the detention center, my phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. Mayor called. Wants to move up groundbreaking ceremony. Call her ASAP. The official groundbreaking for Victory Village had been scheduled for spring, but with construction progressing ahead of schedule, the mayor was eager to capitalize on the positive publicity. I called her from my truck. We can be ready in 3 weeks, I confirmed after hearing her proposal. But I have one condition. Name it, she replied. I want Derek transported from the detention center to attend. Just for the ceremony. There was a long pause. That's complicated, Morgan. He's the face of a scandal we're trying to move past. He's also instrumental to this project's success, I countered. I'm not asking for him to speak or be featured prominently. Just to be present. It's the right thing to do. Another pause, longer this time. I'll see what I can arrange. 3 weeks later, under a brilliant blue October sky, over 200 people gathered at Victory Village for the official groundbreaking. Local officials, veteran service organizations, donors, media, and most importantly, dozens of veterans who would eventually call this place home. A temporary stage had been erected near the community center's foundation. As I stepped up to the podium, I saw faces that represented every phase of this journey. Sophia, Rodriguez, Melissa, my parents, the mayor, and contractors who had taken a chance on our vision. And at the back, flanked by 2 corrections officers in suits rather than uniforms, a concession I'd negotiated, stood Derek. He wore a borrowed blazer over a simple button-down shirt, attempting to look like a regular attendee rather than a supervised inmate. Our eyes met briefly, and he gave me a small nod. Welcome to Victory Village, I began, my voice carrying across the attentive crowd. What you see around you today represents more than buildings and roads. It represents a commitment to those who have served our country, a promise that their return home will include safe, affordable housing, and a supportive community. I spoke about the unique features of the development, the partnerships that made it possible, and the veterans who had shaped every aspect of its design. I thanked donors, officials, and construction crews. Then, deviating from my prepared remarks, I added, this project is also a story of transformation. The land beneath our feet was once designated for luxury condominiums, part of a business that ultimately failed its community. Today, we're reclaiming it for a higher purpose, supporting those who have already given so much. My eyes found Derek again. None of us reaches this moment alone. Victory Village grew from collaboration, from second chances, and from the belief that our past mistakes don't have to define our future contributions. As the ceremony concluded with the symbolic shoveling of dirt, I made my way through the crowd toward Derek. People stopped me along the way to shake hands, offer congratulations, ask questions about applications for housing. By the time I reached the spot where he had been standing, the officers were already escorting him back to their vehicle. Wait, I called, hurrying after them. They paused, allowing me a moment with my brother. Thank you for making this happen, Derek said quietly. Not just the ceremony, all of it. We made it happen, I corrected him. Your expertise, my leadership. Quite the family business. He smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. Better than luxury condos. Much better, I agreed. As they led him away, I felt a tap on my shoulder. Rodriguez stood there with an older man I recognized as the Vietnam veteran from the Outreach Center, the one who had first mentioned Habitat for Humanity to Derek. Captain Blake? The older man said, extending his hand. Jim Harrell. I just wanted to say that what you're building here, it's what I've dreamed of seeing for 40 years. A place that understands what coming home really means. Thank you, I replied, deeply moved. That's exactly what we're trying to create. My son's on the waiting list, he added. Did 2 tours in Afghanistan. Been couch surfing since he got back. This could change everything for him. As we talked, I watched over his shoulder as the corrections vehicle carrying Derek pulled away. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined standing here leading a multi-million-dollar development, rebuilding my family relationships, finding purpose in civilian life. The path hadn't been straight or easy. But looking around at what we were creating at the community taking shape both physically and emotionally, I knew we were building something that would outlast all the pain that had preceded it. Victory Village wasn't just about housing. It was about coming home, in every sense of the word. 2.5 years later, I stood on the balcony of the Victory Village Community Center, watching families gather for the annual 4th of July celebration. Children raced across the central green space, veterans and their spouses set up lawn chairs for the evening fireworks, and volunteers manned grills loaded with burgers and hot dogs. The American flags adorning each building snapped in the summer breeze. Quite a sight, isn't it? Sophia joined me at the railing, handing me a lemonade. 57 families now. Waiting list twice that long. I nodded, taking in the thriving community that had evolved from concept to reality. Victory Village had exceeded all expectations, not just in its physical construction, but in the healing environment it created. Veterans who had struggled to find their place in civilian society were building connections, supporting each other, and in many cases, finding purpose through the various programs we offered. The mayor's here, Sophia noted, gesturing toward the parking lot where the city's official vehicle had just arrived. And she's brought company. I followed her gaze and felt my breath catch. Walking beside Mayor Hendricks, dressed in a simple blue button-down and khakis, was Derek. No corrections officers, no borrowed blazer. Just my brother, free after serving 3 years of his 4-year sentence. Did you know? I asked Sophia, unable to tear my eyes away from the sight. He wanted to surprise you, she admitted. Got released yesterday. Early parole for good behavior and community service. I made my way downstairs, moving through the crowd of residents who stopped me with warm greetings and quick updates on their lives. By the time I reached the lawn, Derek was engaged in conversation with Rodriguez, who now served as our full-time programs director. He looked different, thinner. His hair shorter, his designer stubble replaced by a clean-shaven face. But the most striking change was in his eyes, clearer, more present, lacking the restless ambition that had once defined him. He spotted me approaching and excused himself from the conversation. Surprise, he said simply, his voice carrying a hint of uncertainty. For a moment, we stood facing each other, the weight of the past 3 years hanging between us. Then I stepped forward and embraced him, not the awkward, dutiful hug of siblings who had grown apart, but the genuine embrace of people who had weathered storms together. Welcome home, I said as we separated. It's something, isn't it? He replied, gesturing to the community around us. Nothing like what I imagined when I first sketched those plans in my cell. Better, I agreed. Much better, he echoed, using the same words from our brief exchange at the groundbreaking ceremony years ago. We walked the grounds together, Derek taking in every detail of the village that had existed only on paper during his incarceration. Residents approached curiously. Many knew his name and his connection to the project, though few had met him in person. So you're the brother, said Jim Harrell, the Vietnam veteran whose son now lived in one of our duplexes. Your sister's quite the commander. Runs this place like a well-oiled machine, Derek smiled. She always was the organized one, even as kids. Mr. Blake helped design many of these buildings, I explained, watching Jim's expression for any sign of judgment. There was none. Good bones, the older man nodded approvingly. My son's place lets in perfect light in the morning. Makes his PTSD easier to manage. As we continued our tour, Derek grew quieter, more thoughtful. When we reached the playground, now filled with laughing children, he stopped. I keep thinking about what this would have been if my original plans had succeeded, he said softly. Luxury condos for wealthy retirees and vacation homeowners. Empty half the year, contributing nothing real to the community. Everything happens for a reason, I offered. He shook his head. No, people make choices good and bad. I made terrible ones. But sometimes, He looked around at the vibrant community. Sometimes good things can grow from mistakes if you're willing to learn from them. As evening approached, families spread blankets on the lawn in anticipation of the fireworks. Derek and I found our parents, who had arrived with enough food to feed half the village. Our mother embraced Derek tearfully, while our father clapped him on the shoulder with uncharacteristic emotion. "We've got your room all ready," our mother told him. "For as long as you need it." The irony wasn't lost on any of us, the successful son who had once mocked me for leeching off. Our parents was now the one in need of their support. "Just until I get my feet under me," Derek assured her, using the exact words I had said to Sophia when I'd sought refuge in her cabin. "No rush," our father said firmly. "Family supports family. We should have remembered that sooner." As darkness fell, I was called to the small stage set up near the community center. The 4th of July celebration included a brief ceremony honoring both the country and those who had served it. As foundation director, I was expected to say a few words. Looking out at the gathered community veterans and their families, local supporters, city officials, and my own family sitting together on a checkered blanket, I felt a surge of emotion that nearly overwhelmed me. 3 years ago, I began, Victory Village existed only as an idea, a response to crisis, a hope for redemption, a dream of what could be. Today, we're a community of 57 families, with more joining each month. I spoke about the achievements of the past year, the job placement program that had helped 28 veterans find employment, the therapy garden that had become a model for other veteran facilities, the educational partnerships that provided opportunities for career advancement. But what makes Victory Village truly special isn't the buildings or programs, I continued. It's the spirit of this community, the understanding that none of us heals alone, that we need each other to truly come home from war. As I concluded my remarks, my eyes found Derek in the crowd. Victory Village reminds us that our greatest mistakes can lead to our most meaningful contributions. That transformation is possible for individuals, for families, for communities, that it's never too late to rebuild. The fireworks began moments after I stepped down from the stage, brilliant explosions of light illuminating the faces turned skyward. I made my way back to my family, settling on the blanket between Derek and my father. "Nice speech," Derek murmured. "Especially the part about mistakes and contributions." "I meant every word," I replied. As the fireworks continued overhead, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. From that humiliating dinner where Derek had publicly mocked my service, to this moment of celebration in a community built from the ashes of his failed business. The path had been neither straight nor easy, but it had led to something none of us could have imagined. After the display concluded and families began gathering their belongings, Derek pulled me aside. "I have something to show you," he said, leading me toward the parking lot where a small moving truck was parked. He unlocked the back and slid up the door, revealing several large wrapped objects. "What is this?" I asked as he carefully removed the protective covering from one. A bronze plaque emerged, beautifully crafted with the words, "Victory Village Community Center," dedicated to the men and women who served our nation and to Captain Morgan Blake, who brought them home. "I had it made before I was released," Derek explained. "It's being installed tomorrow morning." I stared at the plaque, emotions conflicting within me. "Derek, this is supposed to be about the veterans, not me." "It is about them," he insisted. "But you were the bridge, Morgan. You connected worlds that wouldn't have otherwise met, military and civilian, past and future, broken and healing." He unwrapped another object, a framed photograph of me in my dress uniform from that fateful dinner, standing tall despite what had happened that night. "This belongs in your office," he said, to remind everyone where this all began. Later that night, after the celebration had ended and the residents had returned to their homes, Derek and I sat on a bench overlooking the village. The buildings were illuminated by soft landscape lighting, creating a peaceful tableau against the dark mountain backdrop. "What will you do now?" I asked him. "After everything?" He was quiet for a moment, considering. "The terms of my parole prevent me from working in real estate for another 5 years. But there's a nonprofit in Charlotte doing affordable housing development for low-income families. They've offered me a position as a consultant." "You'd leave Asheville?" The possibility hadn't occurred to me. "I think I need to," he said gently. "Not because I want to run away from what happened, but because this," he gestured to Victory Village, This is yours, Morgan. You built it. You deserve to lead it without my shadow hanging over everything. Part of me wanted to protest, to insist that we could continue working together, but I recognized the wisdom in his words. Some healing required distance, room to grow independently before coming back together stronger. I'll still consult on Phase 3, he promised. Those townhomes won't design themselves. But from Charlotte, not over your shoulder, I nodded, understanding. When do you leave? Not for a couple of months. Need to complete parole orientation, get settled at Mom and Dad's first. He smiled ruefully. Besides, I promised to teach that construction skills workshop for the residents here. Can't back out now? We sat in comfortable silence, the distant sound of late-night fireworks echoing from downtown Asheville. You know, Derek said finally, that night at the dinner, when I said all those terrible things about your service, about you having no place to stay. I never imagined we'd end up here. Neither did I admitted. I was so lost then, he continued. Successful on the outside, empty on the inside. It took losing everything to find something worth having. And what's that? I asked. Purpose, he said simply. The same thing you found in the army. The same thing you're giving to every veteran who moves into this village. He gestured toward the homes surrounding us. Not just a place to stay, but a reason to stay there. A community. A mission. As we walked back to our cars, preparing to go our separate ways for the night, Derek to our parents' home, me to the small house I'd purchased near Victory Village, he paused. Thank you, he said, the words carrying the weight of years of understanding. For opening the door that morning when I showed up at Sophia's cabin. For seeing something in me worth saving when I couldn't see it myself. That's what soldiers do, I replied, echoing words I'd spoken to him years ago. We open doors for people who are lost. 3 months later, on a crisp autumn day, I stood at the entrance to Victory Village greeting a new resident, a young woman who had served as a combat medic in Syria, now moving in with her 5-year-old daughter. Her eyes were wary, her posture guarded signs I recognized from my own return to civilian life. The community center has daily activities, I explained as I walked her to her new apartment. Support groups, job resources, childcare, but the most important thing you'll find here is understanding. Everyone in this village has worn the uniform. Everyone knows what it means to serve and what it costs. As I handed her the keys, her daughter tugged at her sleeve. Is this really our home now, Mommy? We don't have to move again? The young veteran knelt down, eyes glistening. Yes, baby. This is home. I left them to settle in, making my way to my office in the community center. On my desk sat 2 photographs side by side, one of my unit in Afghanistan, standing proud in desert camouflage, and one taken at the groundbreaking ceremony for Victory Village, showing me flanked by Sophia Rodriguez and my family, including Derek in his borrowed blazer. My phone rang, Derek calling from Charlotte, where he had settled into his new role helping develop affordable housing. Just checking in, he said when I answered. The new family arrive okay? Just got them settled, I confirmed. That makes 61 families now. I saw the feature in the Army Times, he mentioned. They're calling Victory Village a national model. 3 other cities are looking to replicate it. I know, I smiled. They've been calling for advice, keeping me busy. We talked for a few more minutes about his work, about our parents' upcoming anniversary, about the expansion plans for Victory Village. The easy conversation of siblings who had found their way back to each other through unexpected paths. As I hung up, I stepped out onto my office balcony, looking out over the community that had risen from crisis and humiliation. Veterans walked their children to the playground, worked in the community garden, gathered on porches to share stories and support. In every corner of Victory Village, people who had once felt displaced were finding their way home. Sometimes the most profound victories emerge from our deepest defeats. Sometimes the door that slams in your face leads to a better one opening elsewhere. And sometimes the brother who mocks your uniform ends up helping you create something that honors everything it stands for. I thought back to that night at the Veterans Memorial Hall when Derek's cruel words had cut through the air. You'd have no place to stay. The memory no longer stung. Instead, it reminded me of how far we had all come, how a moment of public humiliation had ultimately led to a lifetime of purpose. Victory Village wasn't just a place for veterans to live. It was a testament to the power of transformation of property, of purpose, of people. It was proof that even our most painful moments can become foundations for something beautiful. And for me, It was the truest homecoming I could have imagined. Sometimes the people who try to shame you are simply afraid of the strength you carry. And sometimes, the best justice isn't revenge. It's living a life so honorable that even your enemies come back asking for guidance.